Hi, and welcome to the Road to Emmaus journey. Today we're looking at Hebrews 7. And Hebrews 7 comes along about halfway through the book where the author of Hebrews is working methodically through the different Jewish traditions and the law of Moses just to show how Jesus, as the Messiah, has proved himself to be superior to the angels and to Moses, to the Levitical priesthood, and now to the high priesthood. We come to this point in Hebrews chapter 7 where at the end of 6 actually where the author then says, and so we move into Melchizedek, and Jesus is a better priest like the order of Melchizedek. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Who's this Melchizedek guy? Melchizedek was a character that was found in the Bible in Genesis 14, and we only see him mentioned really briefly with very few details. And in that passage, Abraham's coming back from a conquest, and he has gained a lot of loot and captured a bunch of people and rescued his nephew Lot. And he meets up with this king of Salem named Melchizedek, and all we know is that he's the king of Salem and he's a priest of the Most High God, which is one of the names for God that we see in the Old Testament. And Abraham gives Melchizedek a tithe of 10%. And Melchizedek blesses him, and then they go on, and we don't see Melchizedek again. So he kind of disappears off the pages of Scripture. And so, what is this? And so, the author of Hebrews then pulls out Melchizedek, who we don't really know much about. He's mentioned once in Psalm 110, and he says Jesus is a priest in the order of this Melchizedek guy. And here's why. And he really actually pulls from Melchizedek's obscurity and the fact we don't know who his parents are, we don't know where he came from, and he ties that into Jesus and takes that kind of our lack of knowledge and he makes that into a type of Christ. Since we don't know who Melchizedek's parents were, it's kind of like he didn't have parents. Jesus is like that. He didn't have he was from eternity past, having no parents, if you will, and so that makes him a better high priest. That's the flow of the logic of the book, and then he continues on um, with the tabernacle and the sacrifices in the further chapters. What stood out to me from this chapter, in addition to just the progressing theology of the superiority of Christ, really is this idea of who was this Melchizedek? He really was this obscure guy that God momentarily draws out of obscurity in the Old Testament and then hides away again. And we don't know anything about him. He's just this mysterious priest or priest king with this really long name. And the thing that really struck me is here's this obscure guy. Again, we don't know anything about. If you're looking at the heroes of the faith, he's not even mentioned in chapter 11 when we get there. And God pulls this guy out of obscurity. He served the Lord apparently faithfully. He was a king. God honors him. Abraham honors him, but we don't see anything else. And he pulls him out of obscurity and he makes him a type of Christ. And he pulls him up and gives him this really prominent position. And just I was thinking about that. The thought that really stuck in my mind was more practical and more encouragement even than deep theology. And it's just that when we serve the Lord here at church or in our ministries, in our everyday work life, in our families, so very often our work doesn't isn't seen. They don't write whole books about us or tell a story throughout the Bible about us or whatever. But God sees what we're doing, and God sees us in our obscurity. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, when you're praying in your closet to the Father, He sees what is done and said in secrecy. And so he emphasizes that. It makes me think of 1 Thessalonians 2:4, where Paul talks about his ministry to the Thessalonians. And he says, God tests our heart. God sees what we do in secret. He sees our motivation. In 2 Corinthians 10, he says, it is God who commends us. It's that God who sees what we do when nobody else sees the service we make or the sacrifices that we make, and he then draws us up, and in due time, then he commends us. And so, like this Melchizedek guy, it's shown in the scriptures at the very beginning, briefly mentioned in the middle, and then in the author of Hebrews near the very end of the first century, all of a sudden, here's Melchizedek, and he's a type of Christ, and Christ is a priest in the order of Melchizedek, and in due time, God has lifted him up. So I want to encourage you as you're serving faithfully. So often our service is just not seen. So often our work for the Lord is not seen, but He sees it. And in the right moment, in due time, the God who tests our heart, the God who sees all that we do, will lift us up, and in His way will give us the recognition and the credibility that we need in his way, in his time, and there's nothing like the commendation of God. So I just wanted to encourage you on that from this little obscure guy named Melchizedek, and I hope that encourages you today. We'll see you again on the road to Emmaus journey.